Hello and welcome back to another episode of the TF Soccer Training Podcast, where we are committed to helping your player grow on and off the field. I'm your host, Coach Taylor, and I'm excited to have you join us today. If you have not already, please rate and review and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. It helps out a lot. Last week, we talked about soccer journals and how your player can best use them. Now, this week, I want to talk about the 3 things you should know as a soccer parent as your player starts this soccer journey. Most parents are really excited to start this journey, but there are some pitfalls that people fall into. But first, we're going to take a quick break. Okay, welcome back from the break. We are talking about 3 things you should know as a soccer parent. So number 1, first thing I would say is do not be afraid to leave a team if your player isn't developing. And this is a hard one. Even if your player has a great group of friends, and even as a parent, you were able to kind of really connect with a group of parents. I want to put this disclaimer in first. Yes, we want players to have fun and enjoy coming to practice and enjoy spending time with teams. But the key thing is they should be learning and growing and developing. In the same way that it's great that kids go to school and enjoy going to class and having fun times with their friends, the most important thing is that they're learning. And that's the same thing applies to soccer. If they're stagnating, if they're going backwards and they're not getting much out of their practices or games, it may be time for them to move on. It may be time for you guys to start looking for another club or another team. And I want to say this, even if you guys do end up leaving that organization, that club, that doesn't mean that you're totally disconnected from them, right? Your player who started and developed those friendships, they're going to keep having those friendships. They can still go to games. You can invite them to your games. You can still make the effort to be able to keep those friendships nice and strong. They will still have time to be able to grow those friendships, but you have to sometimes make that executive decision to say, well, our player is not improving. Our player is kind of staying the same. I know they enjoy it, but I want them developing. I want them growing. I want them being stretched as players and as people. And so you may have to move from that club and from that team to another team. Number 2, and this is the big one, and I think most soccer parents would know this, and even a lot of players wish that their parents knew this, which is post-game is not the time to talk about what just happened in the game. If your player wants to talk, they will talk, and they will offer up, and they will ask you for their opinion. But most of the times, they don't. They want to let it go. And the biggest thing is understanding that this is their thing. It's up to you to make sure you keep it as their thing. My dad would always tell me after the games, he would always give me his advice. Now, he didn't play soccer, but he was a big sports fan and played multiple sports through high school and then played into college as well. But he would always try to give me advice right after the game. And I didn't want to hear it. And I would always shut down. So we would always have arguments after games because I didn't want to talk. And it might have been great advice. And most of the time it was really good, informed advice, but I didn't want to hear it. And it's one of these things where I think parents, you want your players to do extremely well. And I get that. But again, this is their journey and you want to keep it as their journey. One of the things that really comes to mind, and I read this quote not too long ago, instead of saying what they should or shouldn't have done in the game, you can say, I love watching you play. And again, I didn't come up with that quote. That came from Bruce Brown, who is part of proactive coaching or formed proactive coaching and was a really big proponent of positive coaching reinforcement. Instead of trying to correct them, instead of trying to tell them what they should and shouldn't do, instead of only trying to praise them when they win and play well, or then when they trying to critique them when they lose and play poorly, your player should know that you care about them and you love watching them play and compete. That's the most important thing. And that you will support them no matter what, no matter how they do, whether it's they play amazing or whether they play poorly. They need to know that they have your unconditional support. So that leads me to my last point. That's to say, don't coach be a parent. I said this before. This journey is their soccer journey. And again, you want the best. You want your player to be the best. You want them to shine and maybe go even further than you went. But they're not reflections of you. They're not reflection of ourselves. This is their life. This is their journey. And they're going to fail and they're going to triumph. But the biggest thing is what makes sports memorable is what they learn from the game. More than what you can teach them, more than what even coach can teach them, it's what they can learn from the game itself. And players, what makes it fun is when you go into a problem and you figure out how to overcome it and you figure out how to succeed. And even when they fail and they make mistakes in the games, it's their job to be able to learn and grow from it. And that's what makes sports so enjoyable. And that's what makes some of the lessons so memorable and lifelong. But they don't need you to be trying to teach it or spoon feed it to them. What they need most from you is support and encouragement. And again, when you're just the parent and not the coach and the parent, it just makes it way more fun. You don't have to go in there and try to fix or figure out the problem. Let the coach be the one who needs to figure out what is happening on the field. And I'm going to have one more last illustration. I heard this point and I thought it was a great story. If your son or your daughter comes to you and asks you for help for a spelling test, you help them prepare. You don't go in and take the test for them. When they're going into their teacher, you don't yell, "This is how you spell this word." No, you don't try to spell out the word for them. You help them prepare and then you trust them to go out there and perform. And it's the same thing when you're letting them go to their coach, when they're letting them go and to play their game. You can't go into the game and then try to joystick. You can't go into the game and try to coach from the sidelines. You're there to support them. You're there to help them out. You're there to let them know that you care and love watching them play. And that's the biggest thing. Don't try two different roles. So again, to conclude, number one is don't be afraid to leave if they're not improving, if they're not developing. Number two, post game is not the time to start trying to critique their play. That is not the time. That's a danger zone. You may have to just let it go and allow it to be their thing. And finally, be a parent, not a coach. You don't try to go in there and interject when your child is taking a spelling test or a math test when they're at school. Then don't do the same thing when you are at a soccer game. And that's pretty much it for today's episode. Thanks again for checking us out. Please give me feedback on what is it that you wish you knew as a soccer parent who started their journey, or if you're a soccer parent, let me know if these tips were helpful. Until next time, please take care.